Los Altos. It is Tuesday, May 14th, 2024, a little after 7 o'clock, and this is the regular meeting of the Los Altos City Council. So, with that, I would like to ask our city clerk to establish quorum.
Councilmember Liang.
Here.
Councilmember Fliger.
Here.
Councilmember Meadows.
Here.
Vice Mayor Daley.
Here.
Mayor Weinberg.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Okay. And I'd like to look to the Vice Mayor. Lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please.
Okay, will everybody stand, please? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, thank you, Vice Mayor. Next item of business are changes to the order of the agenda. We look to my colleagues. Does anyone want to suggest a change? Okay, then that brings us to our special items. Let's get some water. Okay, I am delighted that we have 3 special items on our agenda tonight. The first is a proclamation in honor of Affordable Housing Month. Whereas each year, thousands of Silicon Valley families and individuals struggle to find an affordable home in one of the most expensive housing markets in the nation. And whereas the Los Altos City Council's 2024 strategic goals includes the implementation of the housing element, programs and policies to facilitate, incent, and administer the availability of housing that is safe, diverse, and affordable for all income levels to meet the needs of the community. And whereas in November 2023, the City of Los Altos hired its first housing manager to oversee the implementation of the housing element and to work in collaboration with the affordable housing community to concentrate efforts on the production, protection, and preservation of our supply of affordable housing options. And whereas the City of Los Altos recognizes the ongoing need for new affordable housing development, preservation of existing affordable homes, and protection of its most vulnerable residents, and makes a long-term commitment to addressing the stability of its communities. And whereas many organizations throughout Silicon Valley are dedicated to providing safe, stable, permanent, and affordable housing to all members of the community, and are collaboratively working to bring the need for affordable housing to the forefront of discussion in our region. And whereas Affordable Housing Month encourages all citizens, legislators, and advocates to collaborate in finding viable, creative solutions to the current housing crisis by reviewing all housing policies and processes in order to meaningfully increase housing affordability throughout the city. Now, therefore, the City of Los Altos hereby proclaims May 2024 as Affordable Housing Month, inviting our residents to support affordable housing to assure our communities thrive when all families have a safe, stable, and affordable place to call home. And I think, yeah. I think, is Liz Nyberg here? Liz? Who? No, she's not here? Okay. The next special item is a proclamation in honor of Jewish American Heritage Month. Whereas, ever since the first arrival of Jewish settlers to our shores in 1654, Jewish Americans have helped to grow and strengthen our country, enrich our culture and traditions, contribute to advances in various fields, including government, business, science, technology, medicine, law, the arts, politics, sports, and have bravely defended our freedom as members of the United States Armed Forces. And Whereas the month of May is significant for the celebration of Jewish American culture because it includes several important Jewish holidays, including Yom HaShoah, Holocaust Remembrance Day, Yom HaZikaron, Israeli Memorial Day, Yom HaAtzmaut, Israeli Independence Day, Shavuot, the Feast of Weeks, and Lag BaOmer, a day to pause and celebrate life. These holidays provide an opportunity to reflect on the past and present of the Jewish American community. And whereas the rich history of the Jewish people, their perseverance, and ability to maintain their hope and faith, even after unimaginable tragedies, were vital sources of inspiration for our founding fathers to the leaders of the civil rights movement, and from our earliest presidents to current servants in the fight for social justice. And this history continues to imbue American ideals. And whereas anti-Semitism has been rising at an alarming rate in our country, state, and city, accompanied by an increase in anti-Semitic incidents. The resurgence of this ancient hatred is a threat not only to Jewish people, but to all of us. As a community, we must commit ourselves to work together and create the conditions that allow everyone to be safe, healthy, and vital. And whereas Jewish Americans are part of the success story of our nation, the Bay Area, and Los Altos, and this month the city of Los Altos encourages all members of our community to remember, celebrate, and educate future generations about Jewish Americans, the importance of their role, and to fight bigotry and anti-Semitism. Now, therefore, I, Jonathan Weinberg, as mayor of the city of Los Altos, do hereby recognize May 2024 as Jewish American Heritage Month. Thank you very much, and I'd like to invite Rabbi Ezi Schusterman from Los Altos Chabad to say a few words.
Thank you, Thank you, Mayor, Vice Mayor, and council members. It's an honor for me to accept this proclamation on behalf of the Los Altos Jewish community. As Rabbi of the Los Altos Chabad and as a Los Altos Jew, the proclamation recognizing May as Jewish American Heritage Month means a great deal in affirming the Jewish community's, lost my place. Here we go. As the Rabbi of the Los Altos Chabad and as the Los Altos Jew, this proclamation recognizing May as Jewish American Heritage Month means a great deal in affirming the Jewish community's presence and contribution both here in Los Altos, the state of California, and across the United States. Jews have been major contributors for generations across the United States, and more specifically in California, in the California landscape, since the early days of the gold rush and the arrival of the Strauss family during that time. Jews have been major contributors in every arena, including serving in the Supreme Court with Ruth Bader Ginsburg, in the civil rights movement with Abraham Joshua Heschel, in the entertainment industry with Steven Spielberg, in comedy with Adam Sandler, and in many other places. Additionally, multiple Jewish people have received Nobel Peace Prizes, including Albert Einstein, whom we all know. Locally, there's a diversity of Jews from across religious affiliations as well as ethnic backgrounds, such as the Sephardic and Ashkenazi communities. Additionally, locally, we have many Jewish agencies that serve both Jewish and non-Jewish populations, including the Jewish Federation, Jewish Family Children's Services, the JCC, among many others, making our city a welcoming place for both Jews and non-Jews. So why is this important? What is unique about the United States? What's unique about the United States is that we're a place that's welcoming to all, people of all faiths, cultures, and backgrounds. Judaism is both a religion and a culture. This is what's unique about the United States, that we celebrate and recognize the contributions of those from all cultures and faith. In 1790, the first president, George Washington, wrote a letter to the Hebrew congregation of Newport, Rhode Island. In it, Washington expresses his commitment to religious freedom and tolerance, affirming the right of all Americans to worship according to their conscience. The Los Altos Chabad, where I am the rabbi, together with my wife, has a mission to reach out to local Jews and engage them in their heritage. This is done globally and is only possible through having the safety, security, freedom, and acceptance that we have in our country. Back in Russia, where my ancestors hail from, it was a closed society, and people thought that they would lose their heritage and would be unable to practice their faith. In the United States, however, we have an openness that has allowed us to thrive because here we are all equals. In the United States, we are able to have freedoms of expression with menorah lightings, teaching Jewish values to the world based on the values of the Torah and the Talmud, with its wisdom, its justice system, much of which the founding fathers of the United States based their philosophy on. However, we still find today that anti-Semitism is on the rise, with a staggering reported 360% surge in just the past few months. In the book of Isaiah, it states that Jews are to be or lagoyim, a light unto the nations. The Lubavitcher Rebbe taught this to mean that it's our duty to spread love, kindness, and be an inspiration for others through being an example, some of which I mentioned earlier. So today, I'll accept this proclamation with pride, reaffirming the commitment and the role Jews have played in our diverse history and the job to continue being a light unto the nations. Through accepting this proclamation, we are also reaffirming that anti-Semitism has no place in our community, recognizing that Judaism does have a place here with pride in Los Altos. Thank you.
Thank you all who came tonight for this. Oh, okay. So I understand Monica Waldman? Melissa?
Monica Malkezian.
Monica
She is
Malkezian.
our housing manager for the city of Los Altos.
Excuse me. Monica, you're in the room here? Yes. Hi, I'm very sorry about that earlier. I was looking at another proclamation with a different name. So I apologize for that. I would like to invite you to come up and say a few words. I'm very sorry.
Thank you, Mayor Weinberg. Yes, I'm excited to be here with the City of Los Altos. I've been here about 6 months as the housing manager and really working with Nick Zorns, my manager, to implement the housing element and also, of course, looking at a focus of affordable housing. So excited to be here and look forward to working with all of you to build more housing for the city.
Wonderful.
Mayor? No.
All right, we have one more special item. I see a lot of kids in the house tonight.
Oh, okay, never mind.
So did the party already happen, or are you doing it after tonight? You already have the ice cream party? Yeah? So you guys already know what the results are? Okay. Well, I am delighted to read into our public record the winners of the Margaret Thompson Essay Contest winners. And I will be reading off your names by grade. And when I read your names, please come up, and I have something special to give you in honor of your victory. Okay, at the third grade level, in third place was Parth Deshpande. Second place was Divya Chandru. And first place was Isabella Yuan. Who's Isabella? And then Parth. Yeah, there you go. Thank you. Congratulations. Okay.
Pictures. The parents want pictures.
Oh.
Come on, you gotta get pictures.
You want, okay, come back up. Do some pictures. Is everyone all together? We can do that too.
Mayor says he likes it when third graders climb all over him. No,
Okay, thank you very much. At the fourth grade level, in third place is Cheryl Wu. Second place, Tobin Wazers. And first place is Arjun Anand. Arjun, Tobin, and Cheryl. You're very welcome. Thank you very much. All right, thank you. All right, at the fifth grade level, in third place is Rashik Rahman. Second place, Sophia Reinhardt. And first place is Joanna DePaula. Sophia and Rashik. Thank you. Sixth grade, who knows which school had the most winners? Guesses? All of them. There's a pretty good spread, so it's pretty impressive how talented the whole city really is. All right, going to the sixth grade. In third place, we have Paxton Sung. Second place is Finley Stewart. Third place is Maya Stern. Okay. Finley? Okay, so we can photo. All right, winners, congratulations. Everyone who won, come on back up. Take one giant big photo. Try and squeeze in as best you can, guys. Try and squeeze on in. All right. Thank you all. Congratulations again to all of you.
Can I leave too?
That was a lot of fun.
I approached the bench.
Hi, I'm good. How are you? Good to see you.
Did I see you at Junior Olympics?
Yeah, a couple weeks, yeah.
Thank you. My daughter Emma is in Israel right now.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good to see you. My daughter's in Israel right now. Oops.
No, I actually went to a house outside of Altos. It was so bizarre. So bizarre.
Thank you so much. Huh? You're welcome to stay if you want to hear about SB9 policy.
This win, the first one, the first place.
Congratulations. That's wonderful. Congratulations.
You know, the special.
That's fantastic.
You understand?
Sure.
She's a winner also.
I know. That was a good thing. My daughter was there. She's like,
How are you?
Like, we were in shock that it was happening. And I made the text, but I was just like, yes. That's
How much longer?
Like,
How much longer do you have to use the cane?
I think about it.
Okay, that's not too bad.
Like, you never know. You never know. I have
Of course. Thank you.
Yeah. No, it was great. It was weird. Because it was, but it was nice. It was super, even nicer when
Okay.
she realized we were neighbors. But everything's good. Yeah. Thank you for being here. Thank you. Oh my God, there's no hair.
Oops. Can I get 3 more? Thank you. My wife and kids. All right. I'll give them out. Okay. Thank you. This is good. Yeah. Thanks.
I'm good. Thank you.
You want to go here a few more?
Nice to see you.
Okay. Great to see you. Good to see you. Okay, moving on. I understand that the city attorney, who has to participate remotely tonight, would like to make a comment. Jolie,
I may have missed it, but did you do
Still
your
muted.
report out from closed session?
Mayor, she's not coming in. She wants you to address the report out on closed session. Looks like we skipped it on the agenda.
Okay. Thank you for the reminder. We did have a closed session earlier this evening, but the council took no reportable action. All right. Next item on our agenda is public comments for items that are not on the agenda. I know we have at least one speaker.
The first we have 2 speaker cards in total. The first speaker is Anita Anander.
Okay, let's do 3 minutes each, please.
Thank you very much, Mayor. Good evening, Vice Mayor, councils.
Somehow it's not on. Is it on?
Nope. No sound, right?
It's on here.
Mine's not on either.
Oh, is this on? Are any of them on?
There we go. Do we have a remote that works?
Oh, no. Is it doing it again? Oh, no, mine worked.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, there we go. Yay, thank you. Good evening. I'm here to make a comment about traffic and traffic improvements in our city. As most of you know, I live on Panchita and have been impacted by the Jordan mess, and I want you to know how much the neighbors appreciate the city's willingness to revisit that situation. My concern is that we're about to go down a road which I think is going to make another mess, pun included, and that is a contract for and a grant that would change a lot of San Antonio. My concern is that Jordan, we spend money that's our money and we could change it when we didn't like what we got.
So forgive me for interrupting. This
We
is
are
actually
not,
on our
this is not
consent-
on the agenda item. What is on the agenda, as I understand, is to approve a resolution regarding your compliance with certain measures, and I am not going to address that issue. Thank you. With Jordan, we could undo something because it was our money. With a grant, you're stuck with doing what you're committed to in the grant. And my concern is that about 99.99% of the people who will be impacted have no idea what's been committed to in the grant proposal. I was frankly surprised and appalled by what I saw there. We have worked very hard to get safe routes to school and to move kids off of San Antonio and alternate ways to get to their schools. My fear is that what is being proposed there will delude parents and children into thinking that it is safe to go down San Antonio Road. I would recommend that you look at the data available coming out of Los Angeles, New York, and San Francisco, that after road diets are implemented, accidents go up. Pedestrians and bicyclists are hurt at a higher rate. Please consider pausing this project and getting good public input before you commit yourselves to accepting a grant that will force you to do things that may turn out to be not in the best interest of our city and which you will have grave difficulty changing because it's not our money. Thank you.
Thank you.
The next speaker is Caroline Horn.
It may seem like I'm commenting on your agenda item, but I'm not. I'm part of a parents group at Los Altos High School, and we try to encourage our students to use active transportation rather than driving or being driven to school. And besides all the altruistic motivations that I might have for that, like the fact that kids who bike arrive at school more alert and ready to learn, that the air is cleaner, that bikes cause fewer potholes than cars do, that children who bike themselves actually eventually become better drivers. Also, these teens, biking teens, develop operational independence and don't have to be driven to see their friends or to soccer practice or to work. Now, my motivation is actually somewhat selfish. I live near the high school, but imagine if we could convince 100 of those car drivers to use a bike or a scooter to get to school. Then they could park on the school grounds because car storage takes up a lot of space, as we've all seen. And if all those cars are gone, then our mailman could actually deliver our mail, which would be great. So think about what that would be like. What if all those kids were on their bicycles instead? But what are the obstacles to this dream that I have? Survey after survey tells us the same thing: safety. Over half of our students come from Mountain View. Many of them have to cross El Camino. How many of you crossed El Camino yourselves, walked El Camino at Jordan or Ortega or Ringstorf or Escuela? How does that feel to you as a walker? Think about what we're asking our kids to do. Trying to get the kids to be more green. So if you haven't done it, I suggest you do it. So you can look and see and feel what our kids have to face every day. What can we do? We're very lucky in Los Altos. We have some paseos, and they really make a big difference. These small adjustments can make a big difference. We have several new developments, like this destruction of 5150, and something new is going to be built there. Well, could we reconfigure that intersection so that when kids are going home to school, they don't have to cross 3 streets to get back on Ringstorf, which is a suggested safe route to school, believe it or not. I really urge everybody in the city council, the planning commission, the staff, to work with the developers and with the neighboring cities to really try to make some small adjustments and changes that will make biking and walking, taking your stroller, taking your wheelchair out, safer and more convenient, because we also want people to think, oh, it's so much easier to bike than it is to have to drive. So let's urge you to do that.
Thank you.
We have one more speaker card.
Okay.
Ann Paulson.
I agree with the previous speaker, with what the previous speaker has said, and I want to point out that it is very easy to get a low rate of pedestrian and cyclist accidents by having no cyclists and no pedestrians. That is a very good way not to have any accidents involving that form of travel, but that's not what we want. We want our kids to walk to school. We want our kids to ride to school. We want people to come downtown without driving. We want people who will be living in the hoped-for houses across from downtown to be able to cross the streets safely. So it's not enough to say, well, we just keep everyone away and then we won't have any accidents. No. We need to have a safe route that people can use. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you to those members of the public who just commented. Our next item of business is the consent calendar. I'm going to open up the consent calendar to public comment. If you are here tonight to comment on any item on the consent calendar, this will be your only time to do so. Even if an item does get pulled, we're not going to reopen public comment. So are there any comment cards for the consent calendar?
No, there are not, Mayor.
Okay. Then would any member of the council like to pull an item? Councilmember Liang.
I'd like to pull agenda item 6.
Okay, so I believe that Director Fairman and her staff are here tonight only for that item, so I will move it right after the consent calendar. Does any other council member want to remove an item? Okay.
I don't want to remove, but I would like to make a comment on item number 8 and give our thanks to the Los Altos Mountain View Community Foundation for their grant to fund the next-gen police radios.
Well said. Thank you for doing that.
Can we clap?
Yeah.
Yes, let's clap.
We should thank Captain Ledoux for writing the grant.
Thank you, Captain Ledoux, if you're here tonight. You are. You're hidden by the city manager's head from my view. It's an interesting dynamic tonight. I see an awful lot of people hanging out over at the staff tables and 4 members of the public all hanging out on the back bench. Okay, so unless anyone else would like to make a comment, would anyone like to make a motion?
I will make a motion to approve the consent calendar, items 1 through 8, with the exception of item number 6.
Second. Councilmember Liang.
Yes.
Councilmember Meadows.
Yes.
Councilmember Fliger.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Daley.
Yes.
Mayor Weinberg.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, thank you very much. So let's move on to item number 6, which is a resolution certifying compliance with state housing law. Councilmember Liang, you pulled this item. Would you like to make a statement?
Yeah, I pulled the item because I needed more clarification, and I'm sure the public would appreciate more understanding of the process. There is concern, and I heard someone mention that if we accept the grant or move forward to accept the grant, we are obligated to move forward on this project. Or is it similar to a project we had in the past, like the Miramonte project, where we had intended to accept the grant, but later
So,
changed?
I'm sorry, acceptance of the grant is not on the agenda tonight.
Well, the resolution in order to receive adopt the resolution to receive the 7 million. If we receive it, then we're obligated to move forward.
If I may clarify.
Okay, thank you.
The staff report is basically to state that we have endorsed, or we are still going to implement the housing element that has been adopted by council. So it's just basically to reiterate our how do I say it, our support of the housing element, and that we are going to implement it. So that was the only condition that is not fulfilled at this point in time. We are already in line to receive it. So it's just a matter of going through the process of filing the necessary paperwork.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. See, I think that clarification helps others in the public understand that as well. So the other thing I had moving forward on this is when we say we're going to be in compliance, when we submitted paperwork to the OBEG agency,
Yes, ma'am.
we stated some items that we would be following through. Then, with that understanding, we are obligated to implement those items, correct?
The grant is basically a blend of local fund as well as the federal funds.
Right.
So the federal funds does not require some of the elements that is being required as part of the application and to actually receive the money. VTA is indicating that for us to go ahead and receive the money, we have to meet all the housing element to eliminate the green gas. So that's all we're doing, is we're just reiterating that we have a housing element in the city. We're going to implement it, and we are reiterating that we are supportive of that portion.
Okay, I think that's what we need to make clear, and I think this has made it clear for the public that the intent is mainly to follow the implementation of the housing element. And this is, at this time, we are not going to look at the implementation of the items identified in the OBEG grant for San Antonio yet, right?
At this point in time, we haven't even started the design process yet. We're trying to obtain permission from the granting agency so that we could start doing some of the preliminary engineering. So we kind of have an idea of what are some of the concepts that we would like to implement on San Antonio, but we do not have a drawing of how the roads are going to be reconfigured, where the bike lane is going to go, how the road itself is going to ultimately look in the long run.
Okay, based on that, so even though based on the concepts, if after public input, there are some things that maybe public outcry will determine we might not move forward on certain items, it can be modified and the plans can be changed, correct?
Only thing we have stated on the grant is what are some of the features that we would like to add on to San Antonio. How we're going to go ahead and lay it out, how it's going to look is, like I stated, we haven't started to do preliminary engineering yet. So we're also going to be having several public outreach to get public feedback. And we're also going to be going in front of the Complete Street Commission to obtain their comment as well.
Forgive my interruption, but I believe
that's not on the agenda. Yeah, I was just going to say what the project is not on the agenda. This is just solely the resolution of, saying that we comply with our housing element. All this other stuff will come later, and I think the staff report made that clear about going through complete streets and all of that. So
there has been
we're not discussing the project, and we're not discussing outcries.
That. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, would anyone like to make a motion? Okay, I'll make it. I move that the City Council adopt a resolution of the City Council of the City of Los Altos to comply with the state housing laws.
Second.
Councilmember Liang,
Yes.
Councilmember Fliger,
Yes.
Councilmember Meadows,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Daley,
Yes.
Mayor Weinberg.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. All right, next on our agenda is a public hearing on an SB 9 implementation ordinance. Mr. Zorns, you're no longer director, right? You're now assistant, associate?
Assistant City Manager for land use. But tonight's presentation will be discussed by Deputy Director Stephanie Williams.
Okay, Ms. Williams, thank you for joining us tonight. We're looking forward to your presentation.
Yes, good evening. Thank you, Honorable Mayor and members of the council. As previously stated, I'm Stephanie Williams, Deputy Director, and I'm here to talk about the SB 9 regulations. California Senate Bill, or otherwise known as SB 9, was passed by the California legislature in 2021 and took effect January 1st, 2022. It requires the ministerial approval of housing development projects and lot splits on R1 or single-family residential zone properties. Similar to state ADU legislation, it allows jurisdictions to adopt and apply local objective standards as long as they don't prevent the development of new residential development to provide for increased housing opportunities which comply with SB 9's regulations or decrease allowable intensity or density consistent with SB 330. So some background, in anticipation of SB 9 going into effect on January of 2022, Los Altos adopted an SB 9 implementation resolution on December 14, 2021, which assists with the review of SB 9 applications consistent with state law and establishes objective design standards for residential units developed under the regulations. On January 24, 2023, the city adopted the sixth cycle housing element, which included Program 1M, which requires the city to monitor and modify the regulations if necessary. And consistent with this program, staff proposes the codification of SB 9 regulations in the zoning ordinance and minor changes to improve implementation consistent with state law, clarify language, and align with modified city practices or law. So SB 9 has two major components, which are the provision for urban lot splits and residential development projects. Urban lot splits are the subdivision of one R1 zoned lot into two lots, with the provision that one lot cannot be less than 40% of the size of the original lot and have a minimum lot size of at least 1,200 square feet. The graphic on the screen provides a simple example of some typical lot splits that can be done through an urban lot split. SB 9 residential developments allow for up to 4 units on an existing R1 lot or a lot that has been subdivided by an urban lot split. And these are a combination of primary units, ADUs, and or JADUs. There are different permutations of how this can be accomplished, which the graphic demonstrates. But for existing lots not established through an urban lot split, up to 2 primary dwelling units and 2 accessory dwelling units and or JADUs are allowed. For lots established through an urban lot split, in addition to a primary dwelling unit on each lot, a second primary unit or an accessory dwelling unit or JADU may also be allowed for a maximum of 2 units per resulting lot. But the key to remember is that all the options lead to a maximum of 4 units. The draft ordinance includes objective development standards and design standards for the development of residential units under SB 9, which incorporate these mandatory standards, as well as other objective standards which do not preclude development in conflict with SB 9 or SB 330. As previously noted, the city already has SB 9 regulations, which were adopted in 2021, and have been used since then to review SB 9 applications. To date, we've received 9 urban lot split applications and 18 residential development applications. Based on our experience reviewing these and clarifications over the last 2 years in expectations on SB 9 implementation, staff proposes some minor modifications to the existing regulations to improve implementation consistent with state law, clarify language, or align the regulations with modified city practices. On April 18th, the Planning Commission voted unanimously to recommend approval of the proposed ordinance with amended language pertaining to minor non-substantive clarifications and an amendment to increase the allowable floor area ratio for lots not exceeding 10,000 square feet to 40%. So in conclusion, it's recommended that council introduce and waive further reading of an ordinance enacting regulations for dual opportunity developments, or SB 9, and adopt a resolution rescinding Resolution 2021-57, which established the current objective standards for SB 9. And this concludes staff's presentation.
Thank you very much. Okay, I will turn it over to council. Are there any clarifying questions? Vice Mayor.
Would we be able to eliminate the floor area ratio entirely?
Yes, you could.
Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else? Councilmember Meadows.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Mayor. And thank you, Deputy Director Williams. We need to go to one-syllable titles. Anyway, so a question, and we've been doing an amazing job at updating our zoning, and so we just did ADUs last month, right? And so one of the things that struck me, I think when I was still on Planning Commission and as all these new laws were coming through, is how it made it very difficult for our zoning to be consistent between like SB 9 and then the ADU regulations, and they changed all the time, in single family homes. And in reality, if the closer the rules were to each other, the better for the community, I believe. And there is a question embedded in this context. So, and so my question is, since we are now looking at SB 9, or actually I like the phrase, what did you call it? Dual opportunity development. Since we're now looking at dual opportunity development, we just did ADUs. Would you say that at the end of this process, when we adopt this new ordinance, will we have increased our consistency between how we look at ADUs, dual opportunity developments, and single-family homes? Or are they still going to be, they were very compartmentalized before to some extent, so have we addressed the inconsistencies by increasing consistency between how we look at development, especially between SB 9 and ADUs, which is similar?
So I'll take a stab at that. Thank you, council members. So as we've kind of done with the bifurcated approach with the implementation of all of our other housing element programs, is we've looked at each chapter individually. My hope is that at the beginning of next year, that myself and the deputy director can kind of look at everything that has been amended to date and then verify that everything is kind of matching up accordingly and that there's not kind of one outstanding outlier that is kind of just more like a why moment. Why are we still doing that for one and not the other when we're really able to still achieve the same essentially type of outcome? So I would say...
I'm sorry. I see the city attorney wants to chime in, so forgive me for interrupting.
Oh, it's not important. I was just going to say we're trying to be consistent, and I was just going to add the caveat until we get another range of ADU laws, or if the legislature changes it. With ADUs, it's every year they're changing it. That's all I wanted to say. Sorry to interrupt, Nick.
Yeah, no worries. So the one thing that I would say is that we've, without looking at it holistically between the single family, essentially design review in each individual R1 district, and then specifically comparing it against ADU rules, and then now the dual opportunity code, we have essentially tried to refine it as best practice as we know and see it, kind of looking at it the lens of this specific ordinance. But again, we will further refine it when we kind of do a true omnibus of the entire zoning code to kind of really refine everything to make sure, nomenclatures are consistent in everything.
Okay, thank you, but we're making good progress, I think. And then my next question is just to pick up on what the Vice Mayor said. So I appreciate the Planning Commission, and you guys walked them through it, and they made some recommendations. But it seemed to me in the discussion, the changes were focused on changing FAR in one very in one category of dual opportunity developments, but not really looking at the impact on others. So would you say that was true, that the recommendation for looking at less than 10,000 square foot lots, there really wasn't a consideration for example, large size lots in Los Altos, which you could argue need a similar thing, and Planning Commission didn't really talk about that. So their discussion seemed to be just focused on less than 10,000 square foot lots. Is that correct from what I listened to the recording?
I would say their focus was directed specifically just on SB9 developments, whereas not in general all of the R1 districts.
No, that's my question was specific to SB9, but the discussion about FAR was not about lots greater than 10,000 square foot and all. It was just focused on the less than 10,000 square foot.
Yes.
And so, and actually the better question to ask, because you look puzzled and I don't blame you, the better question to ask is, in the Q&A, we talked about if you looked at all the building that might be allowed, the recommendation only dealt with one, again, the smaller size lot. But staff, at least in the Q&A, recommended that the FAR was really not a very helpful tool. So did the Planning Commission discuss the recommendation to consider getting rid of FAR?
No, they did not.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Flagger?
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Deputy Director and Assistant City Manager Zorns. Just two clarifying questions. The rental term 1464070, it doesn't completely cover how we've defined rental term in our other ordinances, and I want to make sure it's consistent. I know we adopted the short-term rental a couple years ago, and the language is a little bit different. And I want to make sure that it's consistent with what's in the SB9 or dual development ordinance. Did we look at that language and decide just to do a shortened version of it? Do you know?
So we did look at it and ultimately decided not to define it separately because it is a requirement of SB9 regardless if a local jurisdiction has a prohibition, which we do on short-term rentals, but SB9 itself prohibits the rental term consistent with this section.
Right, but as a city, and it actually ties into what Councilmember Meadows was saying earlier about ensuring we have consistency across or different ordinances. So the short-term rental definition under 14.30.020 that I was able to find, it means a use that provides lodging in a dwelling unit for compensation for a period of fewer than 30 consecutive calendar days. Like, I like that definition much better than what you have in the SB9 ordinance. So I was curious if you looked at what we had defined short-term rental to mean before, but then decided that for SB9 you wanted it to be this definition.
No, but we certainly could add that language to this section.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure that there wasn't a situation where you looked at it and for legal reasons or other reasons you wanted this for the SB9.
No.
Okay, so if you haven't, then I can just discuss with my colleagues later.
May I ask a follow-up question to that?
Yes.
Why is 070 needed at all, in your opinion?
I think it's just to clarify, and if the city were to ever allow short-term rentals, it would still be clear that it is still prohibited under SB9.
Okay, thank you.
I see our attorney has her hand up. We can go to her.
No, just commenting on what Councilmember Flagger brought up, that definition she's reading for short-term rental, that I think if you looked in our TOT ordinance, it would be similar because it's 30 consecutive days is not subject to TOT. It's not considered. So it would be consistent, and maybe we should look at that for consistency purposes. And that hasn't been brought up before, but it is less than 30 consecutive days, so,
Right.
or
It's
we
a
just
bit
go
more
with this.
specific. And it has
Yeah.
then the exceptions, I think, for motel lodging for transients, and it just goes into a little bit more about what it means. And then on the maximum number of units. And I remember asking a similar question for the owner occupancy because I need to understand if it's a legal requirement for the maximum number of units. So I understand saying that we can have up to 4 units constructed under SB 9 development. I remember in December 2021 when we were having this discussion and we adopted the resolution in 2021, the question was, as a city, could we allow for more than 4? And I just want clarity there. As a city, are we limited to no more than 4 units?
No.
Under the law?
No, you can be more permissive.
Exactly. Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Liang?
So the chart on 98, page 98, where you have this maximum number of units, so I'm glad she asked, well, I'm glad we're clarifying it, that, and you, in your statement, you said a maximum of 4 units. But based on the middle row of, by saying that up to 2 units plus 2 ADUs and, or ADUs, it makes it seem like you can have more, but now it sounds like your answer in response is that someone can have more units on each lot, more than the maximum of 4 if council, because you said they could be progressive, right?
So council would have to amend the language to allow more than 4, but SB 9 requires that every jurisdiction allow a minimum of 4.
Okay, so the question I would have as well is, on the if a primary unit with an attached JADU, if they have an attached JADU, they cannot, based on your definition right now, cannot have a detached ADU if they have an attached ADU, because that's already considered 2 units.
So you would look at it a little bit separately than just looking at a normal kind of house development with the ADU regulations under SB 9. In no scenario can you have more than 4 resulting. When that includes 2 primary units and then any kind of combination of ADU or JADU.
Okay, got it. Now the question I had is, if a person builds an ADU on the side property and then they subdivide it, which results in 2 housing units facing the street, would they, because I was reading the parking area, would they be required to provide a covered parking space before that lot split were to occur?
If there was an existing house and then they subdivided.
If they build an ADU and then you got 2 properties and then they do the lot, they want to do the lot split, but based on this, it would require, if you have a lot split and you have a primary unit, you have to have a covered parking space. So before the lot split were to occur, would that development of a covered parking space need to occur?
No. So the,
Okay.
the development of the parking space comes with the development of the units, if required.
Okay. My other question is, SB 9 was to increase access to affordable housing, and that was this whole intent. So can we put in language to ensure that we encourage that these units are to ensure that they become affordable, and reference that the units are encouraged to become income restricted or below market rate units? Can we do anything to do that?
I think the intention is that with the smaller lots and the smaller unit sizes, that they would be more naturally affordable, but not have the requirement to have them be deed restricted.
Okay. The other thing is, we can allow for like a 10,000 square foot lot to be subdivided by 4. if we decide we wanted someone with a 1 acre lot, because it's so much bigger, be subdivided into more than just 2 lots, can we choose to go that route?
Not under SB 9, but people
Okay.
would have the option to use the regular subdivision process.
Okay, got it. Thank you for that clarification. Greatly appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councilmember.
Mayor, can I just quickly make a just statement for the record so that we have it, since I've had some public comments or public reaching out to me in the recent weeks. So the community, because it's been reported in the local newspapers, is that the Los Angeles Superior Court made a ruling that is applicable actually and only binding to 5 jurisdictions, one being Redondo Beach, where that is the court case that's cited. It's Redondo versus the AG or the Attorney Generals. And as I mentioned, it's only binding for the 5 cities that were petitioners on that case, which is Redondo Beach, Carson, Torrance, Whittier, and Del Mar. The crux of that case is that those are charter cities. The city of Los Altos is a general law city. In short, it doesn't apply to us regardless if we were even a petitioner under that, because we are general law versus charter. The main distinction is that the home rule or the doctrine that allows a city to legislate our own municipal affairs, it doesn't apply to us in the same way that it does in a charter city. So that decision out of the Superior Court is not applicable to Los Altos. So I do just want to make sure that we have that as a part of our record, so that people do understand that we did analyze that as a part of the legal kind of parameters of what is required or allowed surrounding SB 9.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Zarnes. Before I open public hearing, I actually have a few clarifying questions of my own. And these are all related to the questions from council, but I didn't feel like I got sufficient answers on some of them. On section 14.64.100.2, which has to do with 3-car garages, I understand the intent here. Clearly, this is to not have just like a massive garage wall. Little Roman numeral 3, there are 3 options that one can do with a 3-car garage. The third one is to set back one of the doors from the other. But it doesn't say how far the setback has to be. So is there a reason that it doesn't say that? Or would it be, I mean, it seems to me like it would be wise, would it not, to have a number in there? Otherwise, someone could say, well, it's set back an inch. What more do you want?
So this language mirrors our existing regulations, but yes, we could specify exactly what the setback should be.
Okay. And then moving on to 1416.106. It says all building entrances shall be oriented toward the street. That sounds like you are prohibiting a side or a rear entrance to any primary unit. Am I mistaken about that?
No, that's correct.
So if I create a primary unit under SB 9, I can't have a side entrance or a rear entrance?
Yes, that is the requirement. That would be something in the residential design guidelines, which don't apply in SB 9. Also recommends, and we would work with people as part of design review to make sure that the house is appropriately oriented towards the street. But because we have to have objective design standards, we chose that as the objective design standard to kind of meet that same intent that we would normally do under subjective design review.
That's a curious response. What I think I'm hearing is, yes, the statute prohibits a side or a rear entrance, but if you give us your plans, we'll work with you and maybe not enforce that.
No, and they would have to meet these design standards under SB 9. It is prohibited.
Mayor, can I clarify what you're asking? Are you asking about having a front entrance, but in addition to the front entrance, having a side entrance? Or are you saying the primary entrance would be on the side and you're asking whether or not that's prohibited?
No, I think it makes sense, and I would support a policy that says the primary entrance has to face the street.
Okay.
That's not what the statute says or the proposed statute, building entrances shall be oriented towards the street. And a plain reading of that is no side entrance, no rear entrance. I mean, my house has a main entrance facing the front, but I also have a rear entrance going out to the yard. And this statute appears to prohibit that.
We could still have that side entrance as well.
Yes, so you could have, the main entrance would need to face the front, but it wouldn't prohibit you from having other entrances to the side or the rear.
I didn't read it that way. You were prohibited.
Okay. And I'd like to follow up on the questions that have already been asked about the possibility of eliminating the FAR requirement. Can you please give an example to me of how applying lot coverage as opposed to FAR would sort of lead to a better result?
So, lot coverage regulates the kind of the footprint of all buildings, where FAR applies to all floors of all structures, including the first floor. Traditionally, FAR was meant as a regulator of bulk and mass of structures, and then lot coverage was meant to kind of constrain just sheer coverage of the lot with structures.
Okay, so if my lot is 10,001 square feet and I'm developing something under SB 9, I can have it be 3,500 square feet plus an infinitesimal bit more under the proposed regulation. If my neighbor has a lot that's 9,999 square feet, they could build a property that's 4,000 square feet. Is that, if we get rid of the FAR requirement and we're looking at lot coverage, will we get the same result?
No, you won't.
And why would it be different? Can you sort of walk me through that?
So the FAR would constrain overall square footage, including the second floor, whereas the lot coverage would just constrain one-story structures or what's sitting on the ground.
Okay.
I have another question. if you don't
Let
mind.
me finish going through my notes.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll leave everything else for discussion. Councilmember Liang?
Earlier, you gave a data point. You said 9 SB 9 applications, and what was the other item you had provided? I didn't get to capture that in time while I was writing.
I believe it's 18. Yeah, 18 housing developments under
Okay.
SB 9.
Meaning 4 units under the 9 app, maybe like.
They don't all have 4 units,
yeah,
but
okay.
it's the development of homes
Okay.
under SB 9.
And then the other question I had is, if they got rid of FAR on, if the intent is to get rid of FAR on SB 9s, wouldn't that be something that would come off as inequitable for other single-family residential lots if they have a FAR requirement?
It would be different than the FAR limitations under the standard R1 zoning, yes.
Yeah, okay, just wanted to ask that. Thank you.
Okay, I will open up the public hearing. Madam City Clerk, do we have any comment cards?
Yes, we have one. Ann Paulson.
3 minutes, please.
You gave her the gavel treatment.
So, hi, Mr. Mayor, hi, council members. This is a good ordinance and you should pass it, but I do think there's an issue with the floor area ratio if you choose to keep that in the ordinance. And the problem is that SB 9 can be used for a single family house. So I have a lot that's just under 10,000 square feet. So let's say I wanted a big house. I could go to the city, I could present my plans. They're for a 4,000 square foot house, just under. And they would have to say, yes, Anne, you can have that. And then my neighbors, all of whom have almost the same size lots as me, but they're a little bit bigger, might say, I would like one of those too. And then the city would have to say, no, you can't have one. You get 500 less square feet. That's 2 rooms. You get 500 less square feet because your lot's bigger than Anne's. Okay, that just doesn't make sense. So if you choose to stay with floor area ratio, there's a way you can get around this. You could say that applicants get 40% floor area ratio up to 8,334 square feet and 10% on the any excess. Just like what we have now, only you get 35% up to 10,000 square feet and 10%. This would be just the same except with different numbers, 8,334 square feet up to there you get 40% and then 10% over. And then that would, if you do the algebra, it works out to giving more square feet to the smaller houses and the same for bigger houses, the same as we already have for bigger houses. So if you decide to stick with FAR, I hope you get rid of that cliff that would make my neighbors all mad at me. And but still giving the smaller units a little boost.
Okay, thank you. Any more public speakers?
No.
And I will close the public hearing. And I'll bring it back to council. So what I propose we do is we go through the ordinance in order, and whenever we come to a section where somebody would like to make a comment or make a proposal, you just chime in at that point. So in my version of the packet, it begins on page 4 of the attachment, page 103 of the packet itself. Any comments or suggestions on section 010, purpose? 020, eligibility. Okay, I actually have a comment about eligibility. In section F, which it says that you can't do a lot split if you own the lot next to it or you're a family member of someone who did a lot split next to it. And I believe that is to prevent a developer from coming in, buying up a number of lots together and then subdividing them in one fell swoop in one small area. Is that correct? Okay. I propose that we ask staff to add language expanding it not just to include family members, but also to include entities, so trusts, corporations. I mean, looking at this, if I'm a developer and what I want to do is buy up 3 houses together and subdivide them all, I would form an LLC, have the LLC buy those properties, and then I'd be able to split all 3 of them in a row, and I would not be violating any part of the ordinance. So I'm looking around to see if anyone else has.
I support that intent, but it looks to me, and I'm not a lawyer, as everyone knows, but it looks to me that it covers that when it says, or any business entity in which the property owner has more than 10% ownership. So doesn't that take that concern into account?
So why don't I'll establish one LLC.
Yeah.
That LLC will then establish a second. That LLC will establish a third. And then that LLC is the one that's buying the lot next door to the one that I own.
But it's still a business entity.
Yeah, it's still a business entity where the person within that business entity. This is, I mean, I don't know, but you've probably tried cases like this. I have not. But,
Well,
yeah,
I've stacked cakes like that before.
Yeah.
And a business entity is also not the same thing as a trust.
But I agree, it should be clarified and to put the language in there as a clarifier.
I have a question about F.
Yeah.
Can we eliminate F?
No. Why not?
Why do you want to eliminate F?
I don't personally think that 2 unassociated entities splitting lots adjacent to one another is any different than 2 associated entities. And if the objective is more housing, then I think F just restrains housing.
So if I could interject, sorry, F actually is a requirement in SB 9.
That's my question.
Okay.
If it's required, we keep it. If it's not,
No, that was one of the new additions.
So I would propose then at least adding trusts in addition to entities.
Trusts and LLCs.
Well, an LLC is an entity, but yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Anybody have anything on 030? 040? Okay, I have something on 040. The second sentence says, the layout of proposed lots shall be designed to minimize site disturbance in terms of cut and fill and the removal of trees. This is subjective language, and I brought that up in the questions to council, and the answer kind of was, yeah, it's subjective and we can't enforce it, but here it is. I would propose just taking out that sentence. And I'm seeing nods from Assistant City Manager Zorns. Any objection to that?
Could you clarify which sentence? Sorry.
The second sentence, so this is also in the questions to council.
Okay.
Or from council.
Got it. Thank you.
It's subjective.
Well, I support taking it out, but not for the reasons you have stated, Mayor. I think the tree ordinance that we recently adopted would cover this actually. Because if I understood this correctly, if someone needed to remove a tree, then they have to go through our processes anyway. So I'm fine taking it out. But I think there are other laws that we have in place that would protect trees.
Oh, I agree entirely.
Yeah.
Okay, any objection? Nope. All right, anyone else for 040? Okay, 050, owner occupancy. 60 is MAP Act compliance. All right, 70 is rental term. Councilmember Flagger?
And Mayor, just going back to the Q&A, I would look for support to direct staff to see if there are no legal reasons not to do so, if we could have the rental term be consistent with how we have defined rental term in other ordinances.
I would support that. Any
I
opposite?
just want to add consecutive prior to 30.
There's more to it. There's more to the definition of rental term.
And I thought somewhere, don't we say, I may be confusing with ordinance, don't we say 31 days or more? Anyway, I agree with it, just I don't want to get into the wordsmithing, but yeah. It should be consistent.
Okay. 80 is maximum number of units. Councilmember Flagger?
Thank you, Mayor. When I was reviewing this over the weekend, I remembered this discussion at length, December 2021, and 4 of us were there for that discussion. I actually think we should have more flexibility here in the number of units, especially when we think about attached units like junior ADUs, because if visually, and the way this is drafted, and I think this is what the deputy director was saying, even if it's an attached JADU, that would be considered a unit in the total number of units. And I can envision having more than 4 units that would include attached JADU. So visually, you would still only be seeing 4 structures. But in fact, again, increasing the number of housing that we have in the city, we could actually get 5 units if we allow for attached junior ADUs not to be considered one of the 4 units. I make
6.
Well, if you do it for both, yes, yes.
Then you could have a maximum of 6, but then I think there's an impact on traffic and things that we are not aware of, and
so one of the
consequences involved.
So I was actually trying to do, and
infrastructure.
Lot size, and I know it's going to get complicated for staff, but I was trying to think, if it's over a certain size, then we could allow for more units. But I think this is restrictive, knowing that SB 9 actually allows some jurisdictions to have more than 4. And I would want us to figure out a way, if there are scenarios where more than 4 would be okay, either because it's a much bigger lot and we have a lot of 1 acre lots in Los Altos. So I am not a big fan of this restriction, knowing that there may be scenarios where we could have more than 4 units and more housing in Los Altos, and this wouldn't allow an owner to do that. So I don't know if Mr. Zorns has any ideas about how we could do that. But I thought about and I don't know if there's support, but like an attached JADU, because I think for a lot of residents, it's visually thinking, oh, they're going to be 6 units. But in fact, if it's an attached JADU, then visually they're really still looking at 6 units.
Yeah, so the JADU, the one thing that I want to at least remind council is that in order to have one, you have to have an owner occupancy requirement in one of the units, primary or the accessory. So that just for that component, the city could do, so the primary kind of nexus and the real kind of, carrot and stick of SB9 is really to be able to allow for the potential to do an urban lot split, but then fundamentally the ability to do 2 primary units. We could come back to the council and wordsmith this to allow 2 primary units, allow for the urban lot split, but then allow for the application of the city's ADU ordinance in addition to the primary, which would actually expand the unit creation beyond what SB9 in and of itself. In full transparency, our ADU ordinance is actually probably more attractive to some because we allow for 5 units with the creation. So 2 JEDUs, 1 attached, 1 detached.
Right.
So, I mean, we could do something that mirrors the creation of 2 primaries with an urban lot split. And then it being allowed under our ADU ordinance as well for the ADU creation component. Or we could go in this specific ordinance and call out the 2 primaries, a detached for each of them, and then also a JEDU. So you're going to result in 6. But we're really going to have to be very kind of linear with our statement if we wordsmith it that way. Is that because of the way we've had it already defined? Is that we would explicitly call out 2 primaries, 2 detached, or actually it would be attached or
detached. That's why I caught that. We just say ADUs or JADUs.
Well, and the reason why is because it's when we just say accessory dwelling unit, it could be attached or detached. So that's why we would want to kind of wordsmith it to say, you can have 2 primaries and 2 attached or detached and 2 junior accessories. So giving the flexibility that when you have 2 primaries, they can either each do their own attached or detached, and then they can also have a JADU. So I know that's a lot. It's more so kind of just the policy directive, and then we can kind of wordsmith it because we're going to have to rewrite this subsection because of how prescriptive it is. So it's more so policy of what the council would want to do in the creation of more units.
I have a clarifying question because you just made a statement saying that we allow for 5 units on a lot.
Yes.
Currently?
Yes.
On a regular lot?
Yes. The ADU ordinance allows for the primary unit, a detached, an attached, and then 2 JEDUs.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
And Mayor, so in reviewing it, the 2 ideas, as I mentioned, that I had about how can we increase the number of housing units but still address residents' concern about visually not wanting a lot of units on these lots, it was either allowing for attached JADUs or maybe tying it to the size of the lot. And I know this would be more work for the staff and have to figure out, okay, if it exceeds this amount, then this is allowed. So just for example, if it's 1 acre, I'm just throwing it out there, then we would allow for the JADUs attached. But then anything smaller than that, then it would be the maximum number of 4. So I was just trying to figure out when we could propose allowing the attached JADUs so that we could have up to 6. And there are different ways to do it.
I have a question. So you said that the current ADU ordinance allows for 5 units. Do we have anyone in our city that has fully taken advantage of that?
No, because the new JEDU ADU ordinance just became operative or is about to become operative since we just adopted it.
Okay.
The end of this month. Thank you.
Okay, the end of this month. I think no, it's just telling because the direction we're going. Okay, thank you.
So the one thing that I would at least tell the council is if the policy direction were to want to allow for the potential of additional junior accessory dwelling units, we could not have to reintroduce it by just inserting the language is junior accessory dwelling units are not factored into the maximum of the 4-unit count under SB 9. So we would just insert that into these subsections so they wouldn't have to reintroduce this. So
Does that accomplish what you want?
It does. So, and the key word is attached. I guess if it's a JED, but yes.
Yeah.
That makes sense. So we'd still say maximum number 4 units, but that does not contemplate. Yeah.
Well, and the fundamental too, I want to make sure is a JEDU is a creation of a unit out of existing space. So aesthetically, you are not going to see a fundamental change to the built environment on a single family lot.
Exactly.
Right, and actually, I wanted to just add that because it's redundant to say detached. There is no such thing as a detached JADU. It's a JADU, which by definition is within the space. So, yeah.
So I like the suggestion from Mr. Zorns. I don't know if there's support for this.
I do too.
I support it. Something simple like a sentence that says JADUs do not count towards the unit total for these.
Right, so it's still maximum number 4 JADUs do not count towards it.
Well, the sentence potentially should be consistent with how it's worded in the ADU ordinance, because what I hear you suggesting is every room could be a JADU, you know, and what does it say in the ADU ordinance? So isn't it 2 JADUs?
2, so
Yes.
yeah, we can kind of.
Yeah, so I would prefer that approach than to just, yeah.
And that's
Yeah.
what I was thinking too. I was picturing 2 primary with JADUs and then 2 separate ADUs detached.
Yeah, so we could insert language that says each primary unit can include a JADU, not counting towards the maximum 4-unit or the 4-unit total.
But I think this is a substantial change because actually, even though you're not counting it towards a 4-unit, essentially it becomes a maximum of what, 4, 5, or 6 units. So it is a substantial change, and it should come back for a first reading.
Could we get clarification from the city attorney?
Yes, we would. I thought Nick already said that we
Yeah,
would be
it was-
looking at this and we would be bringing it back. Yeah, we will be bringing this back.
Yeah, it would be just if we were to go down the original first path, Jolie. But if we want to, I think yes, we can for safe measure. But it was just to add essentially excluding JEDUs from the overall unit count. But we can bring it back for a first reading. That's fine.
Wouldn't another approach be to say JADUs shall be considered as considered within the ADU ordinance? I mean, does that obviate it? I don't know. I shouldn't try to wordsmith.
No, and I'm deferring to you, Councilmember Meadows, because I don't remember exactly what the ADU ordinance says, so I don't want to agree to it.
I wouldn't recommend it because the SB 9 is kind of complex in and of itself. I'd like it actually in this ordinance.
So I don't support it if it doesn't allow us to get to first reading tonight. I think it's important, but we might have other things in that. Let's call it a parking lot. Okay. I mean, I support the concept, and there might be other things that. So let's see what's in the parking lot. But I don't. I think it's very important to get this moving forward. So. But
But
that's,
he
again,
already
we can.
stated it's coming back as a first reading.
No, not if we
No,
don't
not if we don't do this.
No, I think what Councilmember Meadows is saying, if there are other substantive, if it's gonna come back anyway.
Well, it is a substantial change, and I think it's very deceptive that we're not making, the public is aware that this.
Councilmember, we're talking about not making this change because we don't want it to come back.
I think it's somewhat deceptive because the public is under the belief that they will be a maximum of 4 units, but then just based on wording, your intent is to have more units, and I think that's kind of like.
I'm sorry, but that is not an accurate description of what happened just
It comes off as a
now.
bait and switch, and I don't know, it's not being very transparent. That's how it is.
Okay, I'm going to take exception to that. I think that we are being transparent. The majority of the council wanted to find a way to allow more units under certain circumstances. However, because making that change right now would delay this, the majority of the council has decided not to go that direction. So we are not asking for more units to be put on. There is nothing deceptive about that. This entire process has been transparent. Okay, anything else on 80? All right, let's go to our objective development standards, 90. Who wants to get us started on that?
Okay, I can do that, Mayor, if you'll allow me.
I will.
So I want to focus on the FAR, the FAR here, and I support the intent behind the Planning Commission's recommendation. But I think there's issues throughout the different sizes of lots that we haven't looked at. And I'm not willing, I think, unless I'm convinced otherwise, I'm not willing to accept one suggestion when there's other, I don't know if inequity is the right word, but I'll give an example. But let me make one point. One concern is, and it's, we all know that the SB 9 does not require an affordability standard. So in addition to the inequity in Ann's neighbors who are going to be mad at her for having a smaller addition than she can do, the other thing is that affordable by design is really what's driving SB 9. And so by increasing the FAR so that we can increase the square footage of the units, which I think is where Planning Commission was going, because people should have bigger houses and it would look funny with 4 smaller houses. But you could argue it'd look funny with 4 bigger houses as well. But the more square footage, the more expensive. And so then we're cutting the affordable by design argument. But to me, that's not the most compelling thing. I'm going to try to explain an example. And I've had residents, not so many since I've been elected, but over the past years, several residents who have large lots. And if you get to a lot, you know, are lucky enough to have a lot that's 15,000 square feet or is an acre even, which is what, 20, a lot. It's a lot. It's, well, or 30 to 40,000 square feet. These homes, if they wanted to do 2 primaries without a lot split, they're actually, the FAR really constrains them because if it's a 1-story building, they have 35%, let's say on a 15,000 square foot lot. And if they wanted to put 1,200 foot, they'd be beyond their FAR. The FAR unfairly penalizes these large lots who could put more, you know, a larger primary and whatever. And I had several residents who were very frustrated. It was under the ADU ordinance. I didn't remember this when we were talking about that one, but it applies to this as well, that the FAR does not allow some of the larger lots. So for example, a 15,000 square foot lot, if they maxed out their FAR and put a 1,200 square foot secondary, whether you call it primary unit or whatever, they'd still have 9,550 vacant lot, which is bigger than many lots in Los Altos of their space, and we don't allow them. And so if we have a FAR issue with these smaller lots, we also have a FAR issue with these bigger lots. So I'm not comfortable making one FAR change and without looking at the whole FAR change. I'm willing to entertain discussion about eliminating it overall, because I think lot coverage, as was answered in the Q&A, lot coverage and setback and all that stuff really deals with what we want to happen. So I don't support the standalone recommendation of 40% FAR for smaller units. If we're going to adopt changes to FAR, we should either make sure it's equitable across the sizes or just get rid of it altogether. That's my impression.
Vice Mayor.
So I agree with my colleague.
Microphone.
I agree with Sally almost entirely. I do agree with Sally entirely. But I would say that there is a different way to interpret the impact of an increased FAR for these lot splits. And I'll use the example that Commissioner Ahi used in the Planning Commission meeting, which is to say you have a 10,000 square foot lot, you split it, you have two 5,000 square foot lots. Had the original FAR of 35% been in place, developers would be able to build 1,750 square foot units. And the Planning Commission recommended increasing FAR for lots 10,000 feet and below, so that those units could actually be 2,000 square feet instead of 1,750. And Maris's point was, it pencils out better for the developers. That's kind of an important threshold. And so what I would say to extend on Sally's remarks is actually increasing the permitted above grade size of unit on one of these lots makes them cheaper in terms of cost per square foot, because the usual response, and I can see it in some of the smaller lots over at Loyola Corners, you can see it now, right? There was a recent 4-2 that sold, and most of the home was below grade. And so we're forcing developers to go below grade for more, to create a larger home, and below grade construction is more expensive.
But and below grade square footage doesn't count.
True. That's why they're doing it. We're driving them below grade.
Right. But if we get rid of FAR, then we're not.
I support getting
incenting
rid of
it.
FAR entirely. And to your point, I don't support having a different FAR for one lot size versus another. And I think the better, simpler solution is to eliminate it, because as my colleague said, lot coverage and setbacks still protect the neighborhoods from, some colossus being built that neighbors will freak out about. Is that, do I understand your position pretty well, I think?
I think so. I mean, I feel like I'm more concerned about the equity, just because I've been approached by residents over, not a lot, because not a lot of people have these really big lots. But it seems ridiculous that they can have more open space than most of our lots in town and still not be able to add a few extra 100 feet, whether to an ADU or to a secondary primary unit. It's just not fair. So
I think that's very valid, and I think the easier solution is just to get rid of FAR.
I think we should retain FAR, because I think what happens is having SB 9 and all these multiple units is somewhat imposing for many of the families that bought here under the belief that they wanted a certain sort of privacy and comfort within their properties. If you get rid of, to address Councilmember Meadows' concern regarding having more square footage, what Director or Assistant Manager Zorns had stated is someone can utilize just normal subdivision requests, and it doesn't have to be SB 9. Then if someone has a 1 acre lot and they go through a normal subdivision map request, then the 2 lots then can fall under normal housing development standards, correct? And they would be able to get their bigger lot, a bigger house.
There's the potential that someone could do their own individual subdivision. However, one of the things that most zoning codes do is the initial build out and subdivisions are kind of accounted for in the parcel kind of spatial sizes. So like the R110 district has its specific square footage size of a lot. So that's kind of why you are almost bound to having, to Ms. Paulson's example, is a neighborhood that is very close in size, but some of them are going to be maybe a little hair over and a little hair under just because of the original subdivision. SB9 gives people a path forward to essentially go around what the zoning standard has essentially restricted under the Euclidean style of zoning, which is one of the reasons why I gave that example, is having too many levels of constraints is one of the reasons why SB9 was created actually originally, was to be able to essentially go around it because it's been overly restrictive. So there are some examples where someone could do a traditional subdivision, but it's not going to be very common. Most of the lots have been zoned in accordance with what would be allowed for a subdivision today.
No, because if you took a 1 acre lot, you went to a normal subdivision, that becomes 2 separate lots, and you're saying based on our ADU ordinance, that person can have 5 units on that one property. So actually that person benefits and gets more units on that site and more square footage coverage. So then that lot, 1 acre lot, then becomes 10 units.
For that
So
specific
then that
example.
addresses your concern.
No, because many people don't want to subdivide. This is for multi-generational living where everyone is going to be on the same lot but have their own spaces. So subdivision is specific to SB 9, but requiring a single-family home to subdivide is a very different proposition than allowing them to have a unit that can be, instead of 800 feet, could be 1,200 square feet. And they'd still have tons of space on their property.
So, and also one of the fundamental, so there's kind of two components that I want to touch on because Councilmember Meadows has done it. So it is intentional to be multi-generational. It's also intended for certain folks. When I was in the county of Riverside, we had individuals that were aging in place. They actually needed to sell off part of their property in order to be able to actually afford to continue to stay on that property. And so it was a mechanism for them to be able to have continual kind of somewhat of a revenue stream or a big lump sum to be able to kind of continue to age in place. And so for some, that is actually a very big component. And I can't remember what my other point was, but it is essentially, it's tied to one of the reasons why there's the owner occupancy requirement, where you can't just continue to subdivide over and over again, or subdivide and then quickly sell, is to be able to create that essentially requirement where we're not just giving away the farm, so to speak. But also there is a big vital component is under SB 9, we cannot exact and do public improvements other than what is required under fire, life safety and access. So if there was, some cities have very significant, frontage improvements and so on and so forth. So unless it's for connecting to the utilities, so on, we can't really require anything above and beyond. And that is a really big incentive for some. So in the case that you're kind of giving, if someone subdivided a 1 acre parcel, there's actually going to be some folks that are going to be more incentivized to not go down the traditional subdivision route so that they don't have to do the public improvement schedule.
All right, Councilmember Flagger.
Thank you. I think this FAR versus lot coverage debate goes years back. I even remember you on Planning Commission and others discussing it. And for me, I step back and I understand the benefits, the pros and cons of both. Stepping back, Mr. Zorns, and understanding, we obviously want to increase housing. To Councilmember Meadows' point earlier, is it the setback issue because there's a privacy concern? So it's more housing, privacy, equity among neighbors to not believe that, that neighbor is able to build a bigger house or a bigger have, more square footage than the other. So based on your expertise, what's your advice knowing all these different things we want to accomplish? And I know that was the attempt here with how you tried to define floor area ratio for different 10,000 below or if it exceeds 10,000. But I do agree with Vice Mayor and Councilmember Meadows, whatever we decide tonight, we should ensure it's consistent through all our different books. So I'm curious about your expertise and what you'd recommend based on all these different concerns you're hearing from us tonight.
So the FAR limitation was eliminated in the AD ordinance that's now been adopted. So I would fundamentally recommend, again, like what was in the council Q&A, I was pretty bold with my statement is FAR is an outdated practice under Euclidean zoning. It is a constraint and an exclusionary zoning tactic. There are cities, I will just kind of give the professional expertise that there are some cities, specifically on the East Coast, that do not work in height restrictions. They work in FAR. Meaning that they restrict lot coverage, like what we're talking, a 20% lot coverage, but then they allow a 0.6 ratio for FAR, which would essentially foreseeably allow them to go up, potentially, 3, 4, stories. So it's, if we didn't have lot coverage, I would be, kind of concerned that we're kind of missing a kind of fundamental component under kind of what I would say West Coast zoning standards. But having both is extremely restrictive, and it really kind of stifles design. This was something that was actually talked about pretty robustly is really what FAR does when you also are dabbling in lot coverage, setbacks, height, is it really creates essentially the wedding cake effect on every single structure in the city, which means that we're tiering it back every single time we kind of go up a level, so to speak, which some people, and they've attested that they prefer that type of design. However, it's also why I think if you were to drive through some of our neighborhoods, for being a community of predominantly custom homes, especially the things that have been built in the last 15 years, I think we're starting to see a lot of repetitive architecture, considering that no one has owned multiple. I mean, I've driven through town. No one's owned 20 houses in Los Altos in the last 20 years and built them all. And they're very much similar and repetitive because of some of our standards. They haven't evolved. So we're going to get very cookie cutter if we keep on leaving the lack of flexibility in our zoning standards.
And I agree with the majority with respect to FAR. So I think we have clarification on that. Are there any other comments or suggestions on section 090? Vice Mayor?
I have a question on landscaping. So a minimum of 50% required for the front yard. Is decomposed granite considered landscaping? What's considered landscaping?
DG could be considered part of the landscape plan, but traditionally it's, plant materials. But some people choose to put DG between their plant materials as opposed to bark.
Well, any kind of ground covering could potentially be a place where people are parking, and that's what I'm getting at. Is that I think our definition here in this section probably doesn't achieve what we're trying to achieve, which is to prevent 6 cars from being parked in somebody's front yard. Is that what we're trying to prevent with that provision?
Is it meant to be permeable rather than landscaping? Is that?
No, it's not meant to be permeable. It's meant to, so that you don't pave over your whole front yard and that you have some landscaping.
Okay.
I'm glad the Vice Mayor asked this question because I thought landscaping was broader than plants because we just went through a drought, a couple of years ago. And so we saw a lot of landscaping that wasn't plant-based. And so you're saying that would not fall under the definition of Los Altos' landscaping if someone wanted 50% of their front yard setback to have bark or other materials, not where you could concrete over. So not that. That's obviously is not landscaping, but other forms of materials that wouldn't be plant-based.
Well, no, I think it is landscaping. It's just I think the council would want a broader definition of landscaping than,
So we
than
can
something
direct you
organic.
tonight to broaden the definition of landscaping.
Yes, there are, so this part of the zoning ordinance is intertwined with other definitions in zoning, including the water efficient landscaping ordinance. So there would probably be some redundancy to that because would all already work together.
So my assumption was correct. When the vice mayor asked and your response gave the impression that it was, okay, all right, we're good. Thank you.
That's great. That actually answers the question that I wasn't able to articulate, which is, are we protecting for this in some other area of the zoning code?
Okay, anything else in section 90?
Yeah. So I want to ask a question about parking. If they're going to change the amount of units that would be included under the maximum, aren't we not going to be consistent with the ADU ordinance? Because then when under the ADU ordinance, we also state that there's on-site additional parking?
So even if you build an ADU and under SB 9, you're using the ADU regulations, which have a separate parking requirement for the ADUs themselves.
And then with the JADUs, you're saying they don't need that?
Correct. JADUs have a 0 parking requirement.
Okay.
Okay, let's move on to section 100. Anybody have any suggestions or comments here?
Just one more clarifier. So you're saying the covered parking space is only for the primary lot, but not for the ADU?
Correct.
Okay, section 100. Section 110, non-conforming conditions. 120, administration. Okay, then with that, would anyone like to make a motion?
Mayor? Sorry, could we ask the city attorney if we're making changes to FAR, if we think that's a substantial change?
I believe so. Yeah, I do. So we should probably consider that. I mean, Nick can confirm, but I think it would be a substantial change. Unless he thinks otherwise, but I think it is. But Nick, do you have any comments on that?
An elimination of the FAR would. Sorry. But I do think that it's if we were to do it, I think it's beneficial for the overall implementation of SB 9. We do have one of the more restrictive SB 9 ordinances in California. We've been rated by an outside entity that's rated all SB 9 ordinances. We scored a C out of a letter rating. So
You sound like my kid.
C for California.
But that's not this one or whatever.
No, this is not the
okay.
one that, no.
Right.
We would hopefully move up a few notches on the report card.
Yeah, but we're not eliminating it. Are we eliminating it, or we're just modifying it?
No, we would be eliminating FAR from application with SB 9, so we would need to bring it back.
Consistent with our ADU ordinance.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'll look at my colleagues and what do you folks want to do? Do you want to move forward or do you want to, Pete?
If we have to bring it back, because it's an ordinance and it would be a new first reading of the ordinance, do we have to have it as a standalone item or can we do it on consent?
No, it would be it's a new introduction public hearing.
So we reintroduce and redo the public hearing. Okay.
Right. We wouldn't have to do a staff presentation though, because we have talked about it robustly.
Councilmember Flagger?
Thank you, Mayor. So just clarity on the urgency. Is there a reason why staff would recommend that we adopt it tonight and look to make these 2 substantive changes at a future date? Because I'm not aware of it. I know we want to get it done for obvious reasons. But is there an urgency to doing it, to adopting it tonight for first reading versus bringing it back with these substantive changes and doing the first reading then? What are we up against?
No, we're not up against anything. There's not an implementing or housing element program that requires us to do it by now. I would say if we're looking to incentivize the creation of more housing, the elimination of the FAR in this ordinance will facilitate that.
And then Nick and the council, if we do decide to reintroduce it, then they should reintroduce it and set it for the next hearing, so we don't have to republish notice. Yeah.
So,
All right, so I'm looking around and it looks like,
I was going to say, Mayor, because we are bringing it back, if there were other areas that the council wanted to give direction on, now would be the time.
all right, so there's the FAR removal, and then there's more than 4 units in 080. I'm looking around, I think that the consensus is let's bring it back for a new first reading with both those changes.
It's not based on the number of units, it's specific to JADUs, if I understand. So I don't know what staff would recommend in terms of that.
Because the units is still 4 units.
Yeah, right. Structures, yeah.
So Councilmember Meadows is correct. I think we'd use Assistant City Manager Zorn's language from earlier to include 4-unit maximum that excludes JADUs.
Okay. All right. And that doesn't, so this is substantive, it's a reintroduction, but it does not have to go back to Planning Commission?
Can we clarify and make sure it's structures and not say, can we put that clarifier?
I don't
That
know.
it's truly just, yeah, it's not units, it's really structures.
So yeah,
And-
so JADUs fundamentally carry its own definition. It is defined by ordinance and state law that it's a conversion of existing space. So a JADU has to be fully encapsulated within a primary unit. So a JADU wouldn't even, if someone did a detached accessory dwelling unit, they can't have a JADU. So it's a part of the primary unit.
But if someone's adding an attached ADU, that's no longer considered a JADU, but it's still part of one structure.
Right, but
Then that's why it's kind of not being transparent by saying, oh, if someone has a primary unit, but then they can add a JADU, that's a attached ADU, then that's not really.
So I'm going to take exception to the notion that it's not transparent. You're talking about something that is yet to be drafted. It is going to be drafted.
I wanna
and
make sure
it's going to
it's
come back to
transparent.
us for a first reading. At that point, there will be language in front of us that the public will also have had an opportunity to see. And if the language does not satisfy what the council intended, we'll be able to make changes at that point.
What-
But this is not a failure of transparency when we're asking staff to bring it back to the starting
I'm
gate.
encouraging to make sure the language is clear. Excuse me, whenever it comes back, it's the 4 of you against 1. So I'm just trying to provide my input. So I want to make sure that it's clear. If it's not clear to me, I'm sure there's a lot of misconception in the public or misunderstanding in the public on what these units are. And what's always okay with you for is the flyby. So I just want to make sure that we are all on the same page on what is considered maximum units on a property.
So excuse me, I would prefer that you not get angry at me or anyone else on the council. I don't think that it is justified. I think what we need is for staff to go back with the direction we've given, and then when the language is back in front of us, we'll have a clear understanding of what staff wrote, and we'll be able to compare that to what was our intent.
I'm not angry at you. I'm frustrated because I'm trying to get some clarification. I'm trying to get some points cleared up. I'm trying to make sure language is going to be cleared up. And I'm always being interrupted by stating or some language saying that it's going to come back. But the point is, if we don't give some clarifying direction, it's going to come back how you want it. But I want to make sure that when it's written, it's articulated well as to how many, and people have a clear understanding that these JADUs or attached ADUs, how they're going to be seen, and that people have a clear understanding of how many units can be on a property. What was understood was it's going to be a maximum of 4 units. But now it's going to be a maximum of 6 units, and by still stating that it's going to be a maximum of 4 units is misleading.
Mayor, may I ask a clarifying question? Because a JADU is not the same as an attached ADU. So an attached ADU does count. A JADU is just a room. So that's why you're right, it has to be written very clearly to make sure that when we're talking about JADUs, we're not talking about attached ADUs or detached ADUs. So I'm sure staff understands your direction, and it's consistent with ours, actually, so.
But I think people need to understand, because the neighbors would like to have some clarification on then how many rentals will be coming next to them, because even though was a potential of 1 additional rental unit on each lot, now becomes 2 additional. I think it's just for clarity purposes on what neighbors can expect, because we don't have standalone policies in sharing information with neighbors, which we could have, but we choose not to. So otherwise, what we should have is with our ADU policy or this SB 9 policy is those standalone good neighbor policy of informing your neighbors.
Mr. City Manager, do you think staff has clarification on what the council would like in the next version?
Yes, Mayor.
Okay, thank you. With respect to the ordinance that was going to rescind the prior ordinance establishing objective standards, should we go forward and remove that now, or should we wait until the new ordinance takes effect?
So we
I would wait.
Yeah, we wrote it to be inclusive. If you actually were to look at the effectiveness, it's resolutions usually go into effect immediately. We actually wrote it to go into effect with the effectiveness
Adoption.
of the zoning ordinance itself. So we actually want it to be together, so we still have something.
Okay, that's what I thought. I just wanted to get clarification on
Yeah,
the record.
and Nick, it's drafted so that when it's adopted and in effect, the resolution it rescinds it,
Yeah,
correct?
sunrise and sunset of
Sunset,
the ordinance. Yeah, they're the same.
All right, is there anything else from council or staff on this issue? All right, then let's take a 10-minute break. Time for us to get back to business. Let's see how fast everyone runs up. Thank you. Where's Nisa? Okay, so unless anyone disagrees, I think it's safe to say that we're going to finish our agenda for tonight. Mr. Vice Chair of the Planning Commission, good luck reporting back on our SB 9 implementation ordinance. Okay, next item of business is agenda item number 10, remote participation. Madam City Clerk, I will turn the floor over to you.
Thank you, Mayor. I do not have a formal presentation for you this evening because this will be very quick because this is a discussion item for the mayor and council. However, in October, disregard what the staff report said, in October of last year, 2023, the council provided direction to staff. They discontinued the use of remote public comments via Zoom temporarily and instructed us to bring the item back in 6 months. We're just shy past that, but we have brought it back to you for review. And in March of 2024, I conducted a survey of agencies throughout California on their current status with remote public participation via Zoom or Teams or whatever platform they use. And the data I gathered, as well as what other clerks have gathered at the same time frame, I compiled in a list in attachment 1 for you, which I can pull up if you would like. But that information, I hope, helps to show that it's changing daily. In fact, a local agency changed their public participation remotely as recent as last night. So this is a very current topic for a lot of agencies. And with that, I will pass the baton to the council.
Okay, thank you very much. Any clarifying questions? Nope, then I will look, Councilmember Liang.
So I think I asked in my Q&A, I understand there may be some concerns about virtual commenting. And so I was going to ask, can the city manager or assistant city manager be able to cover the virtual public comments when they come in, so staff do not need to feel like they're exposed to that?
Councilmember Liang, if the question is in context of an anti-harassment policy and how it would be applied, the city manager or assistant city manager could, yes, take the public comments or that role in place of the city clerk.
The mayor could do that as well, right? Which is what we used to do when it comes to virtual comments.
Yeah. Yes, the mayor could as well.
Thank you.
Yeah. And also, one of the reasons about virtual comments and staff and protecting staff would be if staff members are present, they would be able to, we would allow them to leave or not have to be subjected to certain public comments.
Yeah.
Because the workplace is supposed to be safe.
Yeah, I think I was just asking about mitigation measures, and these are ways to mitigate some of the concerns. So my other question is that we can also break up how we conduct our public comments. So if we want, we could conduct in public comments and then move all virtual items not on the agenda. Like items not on the agenda, those who are present can be taken, and those who are not present can be moved to the end of a meeting, correct?
So, Councilmember Liang, I don't think we could divide it up by in-person and virtual, but we certainly could change the number on the agenda where it's at. So we could say, in this example, if you wanted to break it up, we could say, we will take 10 minutes of public comment at items not on the agenda. If it exceeds 10 minutes, we'll move that to the end. Alternatively, we could put it all at the end. In the scenario where you're providing a limited time before you move it, you could take online or in-person comments first, as long as everyone was given an equal opportunity to comment regardless of how they were making that comment.
Okay. The other thing is that it wasn't in the report, but we received information from our attorney that when someone makes a comment on...
Wait. This was attorney-client privilege, wasn't it? The memo that was, you talking about the memo that was sent out today? That memo was attorney-client privilege.
Okay, sorry. Thank you for pointing that out. So my understanding based on other city councils is they can cut off comments if they take items on the agenda, and if someone is stating something that is inappropriate, councils can cut them off.
No, that's not true. If it's not on the agenda and they're commenting on something that's not on the agenda, but if it's on the agenda and they start talking about something that's not on the agenda, we may have the ability to say you're off the agenda and you please get back to the agenda topic. Like tonight we had someone speaking at public comment and it seemed to relate to another agenda item, which was about the grant. As I need to advise, if we are going to be shutting down public comment because it's not an item if it's on the agenda, then it needs to be addressed at the agenda. But if it's not, if it's an agenda item and someone's talking about something that goes off the agenda topic, we can try to bring them back to the agenda topic. But again, we have to be very careful, and we also have to treat everybody equally.
Right, but I'm just trying to highlight that if we want, we could also keep items, virtual comments on items on the agenda, because it seems like items on the agenda, we would have more control.
I think you're trying to say we will take virtual comments on items on the agenda, but not virtual comments on public comment. And I don't recommend that approach. I think you're treating different agenda items differently, and I don't recommend that approach.
Well, I'll save my comments for later. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for staff? All right, do we have any members of the public who would like to speak?
We do. We have one, Pierre Bedard.
Okay, 3 minutes, please. You are not Pierre Bedard.
Are you speaking on behalf of? Are you speaking on behalf of Pierre?
No.
Oh. Pierre, you're.
No. I hate this camera view of me from the backside, but thank you. Anyway, thank you for, my name is Pierre Bedard. I'm speaking as a member of the public, though I am a member of the Library Commission. I thought it important enough to come in today to address you about this, and I don't really have prepared comments outside of whatever the hell you do, you better do it right. I and other people in this room were victims of an assault. That's all I'll call it. And I don't want it to happen again to anybody. So we can quibble about, I mean, I'm thinking to myself, is it assault or battery? I don't know. It doesn't matter. It happened. It can't happen again. Please avoid it. Now, I say this balancing that we've got to have people call in, or I'm a believer in public interaction, and the ability to dial in and give your comments important, whether it has to be live, whether it can be deposited like a letter, that's up to the city to decide. But again, I just want to emphasize that I'm sitting here and I guess I was a victim. Please don't let it happen again, because it was traumatic. And to think that it wasn't is complete fantasy, right? I mean, it was bad. So thank you.
Thank you.
The next speaker is Freddie Wheeler.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. I was also at that Library Commission meeting, and that was shocking. It was very shocking. It's my understanding from doing a lot of reading on the topic and looking at what other cities do, that there are ways to cut off people who are speaking on items, on topics on the agenda, that you are able to, and Palo Alto just did that yesterday. They changed their rules. They were allowing comments on everything, but because they kept getting Zoom bombing on items, on topics not on the agenda, they changed their rules yesterday so that now they will only take public comments remotely on items, on topics on the agenda, because then, according to their policymakers, it's perfectly appropriate if someone's speaking on, racist remarks, white supremacy is not on the agenda, so you can just shut them down. I would like you to consider that as a possibility. I was just attending a Library Commission meeting, and the person who was reporting from NCLA was reporting remotely, or she was attending remotely, and she couldn't give her report because it was like, oh, I can't give my report, I realized. And so we were all not able to hear her remarks because she had to attend remotely. I realize I don't want anyone to have to sit through a Zoom bombing like that. But I would hope that there are ways that you could technologically deal with it so that perhaps comments could be a time delay, so you could screen them to see that they are not Zoom bombing and they are just citizens wanting to give you their opinion. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Wheeler. Any more public comments?
No other cards, no.
Okay, I'll bring it back to council. Who'd like to get us started? Vice Mayor?
So when we originally made this policy choice, we said, let's bring it back and reconsider, because maybe something will happen in the interim that would make the choice different for us. But unfortunately, in the 6 months that has intervened, there have been no technology changes from Zoom. There have been no legislative changes impacting the way the Brown Act reads and so forth. And there have certainly been no social changes that have eliminated the problem. So nothing has changed between today and 6 months ago when we made this policy choice. And I therefore think that we should stick with where we are at the moment. And I can tell you also from the Legislative Action Committee that there are a number of bills moving through the State Assembly and the State Senate right now that may indeed impact Zoom meetings or resident participation via Zoom. For example, one in particular would allow commission meetings for commissions that are not decision-making bodies. In other words, all of our commissions, other than planning probably, under this proposed legislation would be those meetings could be held entirely on Zoom under the concept of the proposed legislation. That's not the only piece of legislation that's being contemplated right now. And so I do think that over time, we will see some legislative changes that may make our deliberations different. And I still hold out hope that, maybe Zoom can implement some features that would also give us more management ability. But for now, nothing's changed since 6 months ago. And I would say that now, rather than saying, hey, let's not make a change, but let's bring it back in 6 months, I would advocate that let's not make a change and let's not establish when we're going to bring it back. Let's bring it back when there are sufficient changes in the environment, be they technical, legislative, or social, that make the decision different than it is right now.
Who'd like to go next? Okay, Councilmember?
All right. I think this one is a hard one. So let me pick up on actually what our city clerk mentioned, that that the staff report, and actually even it's hard to get the dates right sometimes, but I think it's important to know that we made this decision in October, late October 2023. And my dates were wrong when I pointed out that these dates were wrong. So, it happens. And so we reported out this decision in November. So I don't know when you measure timing, but that probably is right about 6 months. Actually, the vice mayor, I think, gave a good summary of what, I mean, I think there's been a lot of flux and in which jurisdictions have gone back and forth between whether they're doing comment or not. I think one thing is clear from the advice we've gotten from the city attorney is no half measures. We're either doing this or we're not. Yeah. And if we're doing it, we have to be very, very careful. There is no technological delay. There is no ability. We cannot treat any speaker differently, including speakers who want to speak on comments supposedly not on the agenda, versus those. You're right. We can try to, if they're speaking on something on the agenda, we have some recourse. But if they don't really take well to trying to being stopped, then there's really not a lot of good recourse. So it should be all or nothing. When we talked about this last time, it really does, a lot of the responsibility falls on the mayor, because you're going to be having to think on your feet, and of course, city clerk and staff who have to deal with this. What I think is the best decision, given the all or nothing dilemma that I think is the correct way to think about this, I would say we should stick with what we're doing now. I would, though, defer to the mayor. If the mayor wanted to, go back to Zoom comment, I still think it's best decision to do what we're doing now. But I would defer to the mayor, as, you have to lead the meetings, and so I would support probably what you wanted to do. Is the city attorney gesticulating virtually?
No, I just wanted to, I'm raising my little hand.
I heard the noise.
Does it make a bell or something? I don't know what's up with my computer. But anyway, what I wanted to let the public know is when we say that the public can't Zoom in for meetings, they're still able to watch audio and video. They still can participate. We're not declining participation. And then they also can email the council. And so there are still ways to have your public input put in. And even for for items not on the agenda, we get public comment on that as well, and that's included in the packet. So it's not that we're foreclosing public comment. We're just saying that we're not going to have, or we like what we're doing right now, we're not having Zoom for any public comment or even items on the agenda, but we're not saying you cannot comment on any items on the agenda or any public comments. So that's not changing. It's just if we want to go back to the Zoom, and that is under 2449. So we are following 2449 right now.
Thank you for the clarification. So I'll just wrap up by saying I too was a victim at the library event. I was online, and so it filled the screen, and it was, it was a horrible thing. That's a, just one example. We've learned some lessons from that. That was sort of a different circumstance. That wasn't so much First Amendment. That was, we could shut that down as soon as, and thankfully, quick thinking on the part of staff, they did shut that down pretty quickly. That was way beyond First Amendment. But what we're talking about now really does impact First Amendment. So I will say what I already said, which is I think the best thing is to do what we've been doing. The Vice Mayor articulated much better than I am, but I will support the Mayor if he feels otherwise.
Councilmember Liang?
Yeah. When we made this policy change, we have never been Zoom bombed. And I strongly believe that we should follow the model that Palo Alto has adopted, where we allow those who want to participate virtually, participate on items that are on the agenda. By allowing those who most times are not residents and their bad behavior to eliminate all Zoom or virtual participation, we are punishing the residents of our community, because it's mostly the residents who would like a say in items that we are discussing. During COVID, we learned that, and we discovered a tool that increased public participation. The goal of increasing public participation and public engagement is us showing how important making everyone feel that their voice is included and that their participation is important. So I think we shouldn't be shutting them down totally. It's important to provide an opportunity to participate for those who are seniors, who are homebound, who are unable to come in at night, or who have limitations. We're in Silicon Valley. We should allow for and embrace technology when we can. And if we have problems with the communications in our room, which sometimes is hampered based on our technology, I think we should direct staff to enhance our communication tools. But I believe that it is important for us to continue to, we were able to pilot not having Zoom. We should be piloting a few months of just having people participate virtually on items on the agenda and see how that goes. We shouldn't be punishing everyone, and let's try to move in the right direction and pilot it the right way. And then if we want to test anything, test it that way.
Councilmember Flagger?
Thank you, Mayor. So I believe that the Zoom technology or whatever future technology comes into play is an opportunity for us to really increase public participation, public engagement. And pre-COVID, pre-Zoom, I know so many residents who wanted to participate in our meetings and couldn't, and Zoom allowed them to. And so for me, I'm on the side of figuring out how to make Zoom work for our community, because I recognize that it will increase public participation and public engagement, and that's something I fundamentally believe in. We may not have the situation here in Los Altos where, someone may not be able to drive at 7 p.m., but we do have seniors, homebound individuals, parents of young families who are able to take advantage of the technology and call in, even if the technology is not perfect. It's a solution that definitely helps. So I am in support of exploring ways we can go back to using Zoom and allowing for public participation. My suggestion, and I think we have 83 jurisdictions doing it, their own way. I like the idea, and I think the city attorney is okay with this format. Correct me if I'm wrong, Ms. Houston, where we do allow for public comment on non-agendized items. We can allow for 10 minutes at the start of the meeting. The mayor can say, we're going to start with the folks in the room. And let's say the folks in the room only take up 5 minutes, then the remaining 5 minutes we would start on the virtual Zoom public commenters and then cut them off at 10 minutes and then put them at the back of the meeting. And then also allow for remote public comment on agendized items. So that's what I think would help address it. Will not solve the problems. I know that. I recognize that Zoom bombing can be traumatizing. It can get very emotional and affect people in different ways. And that's something I would appreciate, working to address and identify to the extent we can mitigate those impacts. But ultimately for me, having public participation and public engagement is core. And so if there are ways for us to do it, I 100% support it. The example tonight where I think a public speaker was actually speaking on an agenda item, and the mayor pointed that out, but this individual just continued talking. I actually think on Zoom, it's easier. You just cut them off. So, there are actually benefits sometimes when you have public speakers who are not following the rules to just cut them off on Zoom, versus if they're standing here, it's a little bit more trickier for the mayor to really control that person. And so I actually see there are advantages to doing the virtual public comments and controlling and ensuring that they're complying with the laws that we have here in Los Altos. I will add what Councilmember Meadows said, however, because I also recognize that I am not the one in the mayor's seat doing this. And so I do defer a lot to the mayor if he or she believes that this is too much for me to handle for whatever reason. That's definitely something that would override my position. But my position is we should figure out how to allow for public comment virtually. But again, I defer to the mayor if this is not something he's comfortable doing. And it's not a reflection on the mayor, not only the mayor sitting here, any future mayors. It is not easy. It's not easy to be managing some of the comments you hear ranging from, racism to violence. And so it's not pleasant. We heard from a public speaker how he was affected. And so I don't take that lightly. But for me, it's like so many other things where that is what the right thing, at least in your mind, is. Let's figure out how to do the right thing, mitigate the impacts. It will never be perfect, but we should not say we're not going to do something that I think is really good for our community just because we have these concerns. So that's where I am, Mayor.
Okay, thank you, council member.
Mayor, I'm sorry, do you
Please.
mind if I make a clarification? Because I think one of the things I'm going to say is actually not known publicly, and city attorney, it's not attorney-client, but you can cut me off. So one thing I want to repeat is that we did have a Zoom bombing incident. That was the Library Commission. That one is well known. What is not as well known is that on the night we were going to talk about this in October, at the end of October, I was mayor, we had Zoom bombers lined up on our Zoom. Because we held the closed session at the end of that meeting, and that closed session was noticed as only an in-person event, we didn't open it up for comment because we had already said it was only an in-person closed session. We know they were Zoom bombers because of the names that they used, and there were at least 3 or 4 of them lined up. And I know I offended some members of the public who were going to comment on that item, but it had been noticed as an in-person event only, so I had to retract, because I think I said before our break, we're going to take comments afterwards, and then we conferred and realized those Zoom bombers were there. So I pointed out that it was indeed only going to be a in-person meeting, and the Zoom bombers didn't get their chance. But there were at least 3 or 4 of them with telltale names, and they were there. We did not get it because that thankfully had been noticed as an in-person meeting only. So to say that we weren't, we clearly have one that the public has been aware of at the Library Commission, and we had this potential one that didn't materialize, thankfully, because they waited to speak to items on the agenda rather than speaking at the beginning of the meeting to public comments not on the agenda. And I just wanted to offer that clarification. Mayor, I yield to you.
Thank you. This is clearly a topic that none of us ever wanted to have to bring up. I mean, if everyone on this council, anyone who's been on the council, anyone who's going to run for council, does so because they have a love of the city. They want to do good things on behalf of the city, set good policy. And in order to do that, you've got to talk to people. You got to listen to what they're saying. You got to hear different points of view. You got to get out of your echo chamber. You've got to communicate. It is a disappointing fact of life that a few bad apples can ruin a whole bushel or whatever apples come in. It ruins it for everyone. And it's, that clearly is what is happening with the Zoom bombing. And it happens in we all have other parts of our life where we can point to where that's happened. I like talking to people. I like listening to people. I want people to be able to participate. I have also heard some really terrible things. I don't know how many of you have listened to some of the Zoom bombings in other jurisdictions. I think I was listening to Saratoga. This was months and months ago, last year, I'm sure. They were talking about a tree ordinance, I think, and the Zoom bombers started saying, it's important to have really strong trees because you have to have a strong branch if you're going to put a noose on it. That's probably on topic. I don't think that's something that the mayor could have said, hey, you can't say that. As awful a thing as that is to hear. The Zoom bombers that are doing this, I mean, they're rarely just completely going off on a rant. They're being more creative, and they're finding ways to make it more and more difficult to be cut off. And the reason, of course, is obvious. Number one, they're just horrible bigots. And the other reason is they're probably looking to score a quick buck, right? It's just that you want to sue the city. Now, I don't know of any lawsuits that have happened. I suspect that cities that have violated First Amendment rights by cutting people off because what they were saying was offensive, if they were contacted, there was probably a quick settlement. That's usually how these things happen. I mean, no city is going to want to take this, public have a lawsuit filed against them if they can avoid it. Bringing that back to Los Altos, I'm with the vice mayor and with Councilmember Meadows, and it's not because it's too much for me to handle. I've heard and handled a lot, and I think anyone who runs for council, whether they sit on this dais or not, if you've put your name up to run for an elective office, you are tough enough to take the spears that get thrown by the public. Even the spears that are as horrible as outright racists and bigots tend to throw. But there are other considerations. It's not just us up here. It is everyone else in the room. It's city staff. It's other members of the public. It's commissioners. And quite frankly, as the mayor, and I suspect every other mayor before and who comes after me, is going to want to let people speak. Yes, there was a public speaker who probably was speaking on an agenda item more than not, but it was not worth using the gavel and shutting that down and saying, no, you got to wait 5 minutes for a different agenda item. Let people speak, and if it's a small issue, I'm not going to interrupt them. But as much as I value getting more and more input from people and letting them speak, I do want to put out there that for me personally, and I don't know about my colleagues, but for me personally, if you want to tell me something, you're going to get a far more, you're going to have my attention far more if you send an email or you call me up or you see me in the supermarket and you stop me. Freddie, that survey that you sent, I read that, I think Saturday night. That was my big fancy Saturday night. No dancing for me. I read the survey and I read those comments. And I, when I went to bed, I thought about them, and I thought about them the next day, and I thought about them this morning when I was getting ready. If all of those 100 plus commenters had called in on Zoom, or even if they'd been here in public, I mean, I would have gotten their message was clear. But frankly, looking at something ahead of time, it gives me time to think it through, to process it. And I can remember people that have come into a council meeting on a complicated issue. They've had something important to say, and I haven't been able to process it because in the moment, a decision had to be made. Now, again, that's not a reason not to do Zoom commenting. But I do want to put out there that even though I'm taking the position that we should make our trial run permanent, I'm not doing that because I want to shut down public comment or I want to shut down debate. I really do want to hear from people. And I suspect all my colleagues are the same, and we're not hard to get a hold of. I mean, look, we're not members of Congress. We all have phone numbers and emails through the city. It's easy to find us, easy to contact us. And when reasonable people call up with an important issue and they want to discuss something reasonably, they're going to get a reasonable response back. I have changed positions because I have sat down and met with people. I remember thinking about our resolution condemning anti-Semitism and anti-Palestinianism. Spent a lot of time with constituents, and it wasn't because of the 150 people that came up. It was because of the people that reached out to me and said, hey, Jonathan, I know you're thinking about this a different way. We want to give you a different perspective. I regularly have email contact, telephone contact with a lot of different members of the community. And again, if you want to get into Jonathan Weinberg's side, if you want me to think about something, that's going to be the most effective way. But bringing it back on balance, I think that the policy that we adopted on a trial basis, we ought to stick with it. And perhaps another council, the next council can reconsider it. And certainly if there is a change in technology or an understanding of the law, as with any issue, I think we ought to relook at it and see what we can do that will protect the community, but also allow the community as much opportunity as possible to contribute. Yeah, Councilmember Flagger.
Thank you, Mayor, and I appreciate you explaining your reason behind supporting continuing the status quo. because that answers one of the questions I had about how, if you were comfortable if we move forward with resuming Zoom comments. So hearing that it's not a comfort issue with you, but these other reasons you've mentioned, then I definitely will be voting. I don't know what the motion will be, but my position will be for us to figure out how to resume Zoom comments. And I don't think there's majority support for that, and that's okay. I will say that similar to how you just described how you best receive public comment, it's very similar that members of the public give public comment differently, right? And so some people will do the email, some people will do the phone call, some people will do office hours, some people will want to come here in person, but the virtual also works better. So you have described how you best receive it, but we also have to think of the different ways and make it available to as many residents as possible. And this, I recognize I'm in the minority here, but I just wanted to make that comment to say another reason why I will be voting tonight, depending on the motion and how it's framed. But my position is really for us to resume Zoom comments and figure out how to do it, mitigating all the issues. So that's my position, Mayor. Thank you.
Okay, and thank you for pointing that out, because that was really important. And you're right, I didn't touch on that. I'm glad that you brought that up.
Go ahead. He had his
Vice
hand
Mayor.
first.
Nobody's going to stop council members from making a motion on this, but we don't actually have to make a motion and do a thing seemingly based on the will of the majority. We can just move on and not take action tonight.
Well, I actually did want to make a motion, and I would like to make a motion that we have a pilot period, maybe a couple of months, to test having public comments only on items on the agenda, virtual hybrid comments for items on the agenda, and we could do the limited items not on the agenda to allow, like you said, 10 minutes in the beginning. And then if those we don't finish, we move those to the end. So like the example that you gave. So I would like that we test that way. And then if it's a couple months and we learn that it's still problematic, then we can come back and do it this way. But then if we find that it is a positive experience and it's something that we can work with, we should try it.
So
I have a substitute motion.
Oh, I just want to clarify her motion, then you can throw your substitute motion. Just to clarify, because you started out saying only allow virtual comments for agendized.
The model that you gave.
Okay. So let me second the motion after my clarification, then you can do a substitute. So based on the clarification, which I think aligns with my suggestion, I will second your motion.
Okay.
I have a substitute motion, and I move we take no action.
That's not a substitute motion.
So if the substitute motion, procedurally, if the substitute motion passes, that's the end of it. Or
Yes.
if we take a motion on Councilmember Liang, if we take a vote on Councilmember Liang's motion and it fails, that's also the end of it, right?
Yes, but you vote on the substitute motion, which means it's a motion to take no action.
Yeah, the order of business is that you deal with the substitute motion first, and it may render the original motion moot.
Right, I just wanted to clarify that they're doing essentially the same thing, just in a different way.
I think we need a second, though, on the substitute motion.
I'll go ahead and second it.
So clerk?
Try.
That's not the intent of a substitute motion.
This is a vote on the substitute motion to take no action made by Councilmember Daley and seconded by Mayor Weinberg. I'm sorry, Vice Mayor Daley and seconded by Mayor Weinberg. Councilmember Meadows.
Yes.
Councilmember Fliger.
No.
Councilmember Liang.
No.
Vice Mayor Daley.
Yes.
Mayor Meadows. I'm sorry, God, I do it again. Mayor Weinberg. I'm looking at her and I'm talking to her. Mayor Weinberg.
Aye.
That's okay. Now you're tripping me up. Okay. Motion carries 3-2 with council members Flagger and Liang opposed.
Okay, that brings us to item 11, which is informational only. That is our tentative calendar. Now we are at council and staff reports and direction for on future agenda items. Who'd like to get us going? Okay, I have a report. So I attended the Boy Scouts of America, the Stanford District Awards Dinner a couple of weeks ago. It was very interesting. I didn't realize how large the Boy Scouts really are in Los Altos, and there's a lot of civic engagement involved. So we may not see it, but they're there, and they are very charitable and helping a lot of people. And I was delighted to accept a thank you note from the Boy Scouts that was directed to the entire city. So I wanted to pass that on to my colleagues and to staff as well. So if anyone on staff is dealing with the Boy Scouts, you are appreciated. I also attended, along with Councilmember Flagger, Councilmember Meadows, the Champions for Youth fundraising luncheon. And I wanted to put on the everyone's sort of radar that the VTA is going to begin the a noise reduction program on State Route 85 beginning later this summer. And what they're going to do is they're going to try 5 different noise abatement projects on different parts of State Route 85. One of them actually is right by Los Altos, and another one is in Mountain View, not far from Los Altos. The other 3 are further away. And the purpose of this, of course, is to get information and try to figure out what's the most effective, and then they will probably adopt that and apply it more widely. But I just wanted everyone to know that that's going to start happening. And who is our representative on the SR 85 corridor? Councilmember Flagler. I don't know if you guys want to become or eliminate your dormancy over this, but it may be worthwhile at least putting it, on your radar that this is something that the jurisdictions may want to give input on. And that's my report. I have no future agenda items to suggest. Okay, now someone else has to go.
All right, well, you gave my report and about the Champions for Youth luncheon, which was always a heartwarming affair, especially when it's not at 7:30 in the morning.
Anyone else? All right, then.
I have a future agenda item. I would like to agendize a discussion as to whether we should discuss the benefits of becoming a charter city. And if so, we could move forward and understand the steps going forward.
All right. I'm not seeing a second or a third on that. Anything else? All right. Anyone else? No. We are adjourned.